So hello, welcome back to Ecstatic Self. Today I am introducing you to another really wonderful guest. His name is Larry Armstead. He is a relationship expert, life coach, and author, and a new friend of mine. And I thought we would have some really beautiful conversation today that I would like to share. So, hey Larry, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the introduction.
Absolutely. So, we've had a lot of conversations on our own about how we form meaningful and quality relationships with other people. And I know we've talked a lot about the benefits of transparency, vulnerability, being open, establishing good communication. So for you, as a queer man, as a gay man who's married to a husband, you know, for you, what are some of the things that you find you're able to really do for yourself that opens up really great dynamics between you and your partner, whether it's with your communication or with how you treat yourself or what you bring to the table? Like, what are some of the big things that you found that really work for you?
I mean, I think for me, it's always been a thing where I have to make sure that I'm taking care of me, because if I don't take care of me, I can't, show up in the relationship well. And the biggest thing for me is my spiritual meditative practice. It's a daily practice. It's something that I have to do. He actually notices it. He's like, "You haven't meditated or journaled like in a while, have you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you really noticed that." But it's something for me that really just keeps me open and connected and grounded. With my meditation, with my spiritual practice, with my journaling, I found that I'm a lot more open, I'm a lot more receptive, and I'm willing to be vulnerable with him. And I mean, as well as I do, being a gay man, that vulnerability is not something that we typically like to do, because, at least in my experience growing up, you were wide open. You were one of the only, and you became a target for being vulnerable. So you really early on built up a wall. And I've been able to reverse that with just journaling and going through things in my spiritual practice. And people ask me, what are the tenets of your spiritual practice? And sometimes I decline to tell people, because I'm like, I don't want you to take that and say, okay, well, this is what I need to do. I'll share with you what works for me. But it's by no means an exhaustive list or things that you have to do. But my spiritual practice, and for whatever reason, I brought this over here with me today, so I have a dedicated journal that I journal in daily as part of my spiritual practice. And that just helps me to reflect on what may be going on in my inner world, what's going on with me spiritually, what's going on in my relationship. It just kind of helps me get all of my thoughts down, stream of consciousness on paper. And then currently, I am reading a book by Iyanla Vanzant called Forgiveness. And it's 21 days on how to forgive everyone for everything. And she's employing in there some techniques for emotional freedom technique and tapping that I'm finding to be really useful. And then from there, I actually go into a meditation. And I've been studying the Nam-myoho Renge Kyo meditation. And that's what I've been finding that's keeping me the most open and the most connected spiritually.
And that one's Nichiren Buddhist, right? That mantra?
Yes, absolutely. And it's funny because I found that one watching one of my favorite movies. What's Love Got to Do with It? The life story of Tina Turner. And it's a movie that you probably shouldn't love, because let's be honest, it's a little grim, it's a little abusive, the stuff that she went through. But it's a classic movie, especially among Black people. It's a classic. What else can you say about it? And that's one of the things that she learns in the movie as part of her journey, about how that meditation opens her up and she's able to see things clearly, and she's able to get out of an abusive relationship and to begin living life truly for the first time for herself.
Hallelujah. No, I admittedly have never seen that movie, but I think I actually need to go download it now, because it sounds like valuable life lessons in the process.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the book by itself, it's based on her autobiography from the 80s, I believe. And I mean, it glosses over it, of course. That's, what a Hollywood movie is going to do. But that was the biggest nugget that I've taken out of that movie.
I love that you bring up the idea of both vulnerability and forgiveness, because I know those are two tenet ideas in my own personal development. Vulnerability in the sense that if you really want to have meaningful relationships with another person, then you have to be vulnerable. But you're right, growing up queer, growing up gay, there was these feelings of vulnerability being a liability, that if you're vulnerable, then people will be able to hurt you. But so long as you go into any relationship with that assumption of needing to be guarded, needing to be protected, intimacy is going to be very hard, if impossible, to cultivate. And I think very much tied to vulnerability is that idea of forgiveness, because if you were still resentful of yourself and the things that you didn't live up to, if you're resentful of other people for the way they've hurt you or disappointed you, and you haven't really moved on and gone through a process of forgiveness and realizing it's an ongoing process, right? We have to keep going deeper with it. It's very hard to connect, because then you end up living in resentment, you live in fear, you live in anger, and all those things are very much antithetical to connection.
Yeah, I mean, and just kind of jumping on that, I mean, and speaking of my husband, I just hear the garage door go up, so he'll probably be walking across at some point. But, it's a conversation that he and I recently just had no longer than maybe a month ago. He sat with me downstairs and he said, "You know what? What's going on here?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He was like, "Well, this person here, this is not the person I met and fell in love with. What's going on?" And of course, the first thing that you do in a situation like that is, "Oh, you're crazy," and you immediately go on the defensive. But if it's coming into your energy field, it's there for a reason. It's there for learning. It's there for growth. And so as we dug into that, and we actually went to our therapist and everything for it, and he was just like, "It seems like you've shut down, or you're not willing to be vulnerable, or you're not willing to be open." And admittedly, I had shut down. I had been unwilling to let him in on my life, on what was going on my coaching, on any of those things, because I felt like, oh, those are mine. We have this mind thing that we develop when we're like 3 years old. Everything is mine, mine, mine. And I felt like, well, he doesn't need to know this stuff. This is mine. He doesn't need to know about my meditative practice or my spiritual practice or anything like that. But it caused me to begin to completely just shut him out of everything unknowingly. And it was funny at that point, because I went back to my journal and realized that I hadn't journaled in almost 6 to 7 months, which means for me, my journaling, my meditation, and my reading, they all go together. So if one didn't happen, then none of the other stuff happened either. So here I am, 6 months out from having any connection with myself, and he immediately, well, he didn't, it wasn't immediate, but he noticed it, and it was enough for him to say, "You either basically need to shit or get off the pot. So you need to either, shape up, get it together, or this can't be." And that was enough for me to say, "Oh, you really do have to take care of yourself."
And I think that's an experience that a lot of people can relate to, like, right, like even somebody who's pretty darn self-aware and helps counsel other people on their relationships and their relationships with themselves. You could go for that length of time without realizing that you had stopped investing in your own internal connection. Like, I feel like that's probably a much more common experience than people realize.
It definitely is, because you're giving so much of yourself to your clients and to to YouTube and to this person and that person, and you're giving, and then bam, COVID happens too, right? So you could throw that nice stuff in the mix there, and then you're just like, well, I don't want to do anything. And one day of not doing anything turns into 1 month, turns into 3 months, and all of a sudden you're having the most heart-wrenching and heartbreaking conversation of your life.
And COVID's an example, but there's other traumatic experiences we have like that.
Absolutely.
And it's a fine tightrope between like giving yourself the space you need to process and not like try to rush through the experience, but then also doing your work to process, right? Like, so you don't want to do too much, you don't want to force yourself, you want to let yourself go through the grieving, go through the emotions, but there still needs to be some level of engagement going on, hopefully.
Yeah, and a lot of people say, well, what do you mean when you say do the work? For me, it is about really getting to the bottom of that ugly, nasty, cringeworthy truth, that stuff that you tell yourself, like when you're in the shower or when you're driving and you look up and like, how the hell did I get to where I'm at now? Because you just haven't been there. It's that truth, it's that voice that you really have to get to it, and you have to be like, yeah, and you have to own it. Even though your initial instinct is to be defensive or just to go off, you really have to own it at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not in my best place. I'm screwing up. I need to fix it.
Yeah. And that is the hardest pill in the world to swallow. That you are not in the best spot, that what someone else is saying about you, their negative experience of you is actually valid. And that's the one thing that I realized, that if it comes up in somebody else's experience, it's their experience and they're perfectly entitled to it and they're perfectly entitled to have their feeling, despite what you may be thinking, because it's their experience of you at that time.
Yeah. And that's also where the forgiveness also needs to come in. Not only forgiving them for, maybe pushing your buttons, but also forgiving yourself. Because I know a lot of us want to think, oh, I'm always doing the right thing. I'm always doing the best I can. I'm always trying to live my best life as best as I'm able. And then when you realize, like, oh, crap, I could have been doing so much more. I could have been doing so much better. And then not going into that resentment, not going into, like, you effed up, screw you, why did I do that to myself? I'm such a loser. Like, just saying, no, okay, I realize I could do better. How do I start doing better then?
Yeah, and it's a definite tightrope to say, okay, well, yeah, I'm the biggest screw up in the world. That's never going to be a healthy way to come out of anything like this. What you can do is you can own, like you said, yeah, I didn't make the best decisions, or yeah, I wasn't giving the most effort, or yeah, I wasn't doing what I should have been doing. I mean, he pointed out, he was like, you pretty much, because my traditional 9 to 5, I work from home. And he was like, well, we have cats, the cat litter hasn't been done, and you haven't taken out the trash, and you haven't straightened up the house. You're literally just existing. You want to lay around. And I was like, that's a valid experience. That, yeah. And I had to own all of that. And I had to not even look for a scapegoat to take it off my shoulders. I couldn't look for COVID to take it off, or I couldn't say, "Oh, well, you haven't done such and such." Because again, when you start pointing to someone else, or what about this, or what about that, it's a cop out, because you really don't want to sit in that discomfort and you really don't want to own it. Sometimes you just got to sit in the discomfort and you got to be like, "Okay, this is what it is," and you have to admit it to yourself. And you, like you said, you have to forgive yourself. You have to forgive yourself of everything before you can ever think about projecting it outward to someone else.
And I find it's like such a process too, because you're like, okay, I kind of forgive myself for some things, but I'm not going to forgive myself about this other stuff. And then, oh, a week ago I thought I forgave myself about this, but it's still coming back, and now I'm feeling guilty about it again, or angry about it again. It's such a process.
Yeah. It's such a process. I mean, and that's why for me, it's really important to journal this stuff out and capture that stream of consciousness, because we have, I think the number is like upwards of 10,000 thoughts a day that are just subconscious, unconscious thoughts that we're not even aware of or in control of, right? And if we don't capture just a little bit of that to see where it is the breakdown in our own self communication is, then how in the hell are we going to forgive ourselves? How are we not going to keep on running back to that? Because for me, true forgiveness isn't saying, "Oh, I forgive you, namaste, everything is right with the world." That is not true forgiveness for me. True forgiveness is owning what you've gone through, standing in that discomfort, and then getting up from it, and then knowing you don't have to revisit that. If you take action to steer away from that, you don't have to revisit that. You don't have to beat yourself up from that. Now your question is to yourself, what was the lesson? What am I supposed to learn? Because all things are lessons that the universe would have us to learn. Yeah.
And I love your idea too, that so much about having a good relationship starts with being good within yourself. Like I had somebody, one of my YouTube subscribers, leave a comment a couple days ago saying, like, it's really hard for me to focus on myself. I always want to take care of other people. I want to make sure the stuff between us is okay, but I never want to deal with this stuff. And I think that's a very common feeling, right? Like we want to just, like, if we make the external stuff okay, then we'll be okay. But the truth is the better state that we're in, the better relationships we'll be able to maintain, the more we'll be able to offer other people. And so good relationships really do start here, inside, and then outward is an expression of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and even when you said, when your subscriber said, I want to take care of other people and other things, a lot of times, if you really check in on and tell the truth on that, it's inauthentic. It's just it's a distraction from you having to deal with your own inner voice, inner turmoil, inner trauma, inner dialogue. It's really just a distraction. It's inauthentic, and it's preventing you from addressing the things with yourself, saying, "Hey, I need help," or "I need time for me." Then we end up feeling guilty that, oh, we're taking time for ourselves, or we're stepping away from the YouTube camera, or we're not going to be answering phone calls for the day because we're taking some time for ourselves just to reconnect with ourselves. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with reconnecting to yourself, and there's nothing wrong with saying no to other people and putting yourself at the front of the line.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And it's, especially when you're not accustomed to it, it's so hard to do. It's like you have this freight train moving in a direction, like, I don't want to pay attention to myself, pay attention to other people. And then when you're trying to be like, okay, we'll make it about me. All my train cars are going that way. I don't want to turn them around and turn them this direction. And momentum going that direction away from me.
Absolutely. But I mean, you got to realize you're the one driving the train cars.
And realize
stop the car, pull the brake.
And realize that your outer life is a reflection of your inner life, right? The relationships you have, the life you live is a reflection of what's going on inside of you for the most part.
Absolutely. I mean, I really do think that what's going on inside of you
is a complete reflection, and what you see is a complete reflection of that inner voice, that inner turmoil. I was telling someone just the other day that if you go into a situation expecting to see something that is being reflected, or that you're just, rolling over and over inwardly, 9 times out of 10, I would even say 9.9 times out of 10, you're going to find exactly what you've been mulling over inwardly, because that is what you're focused on. That's what you're fixated on. So that's what you're going to see.
Yeah. And I love when people are like, oh, I can never attract a significant other that's really quality. Like, nobody, like, everybody's like such a flake, or like such, like, not a great person to be with. But then you look at their own life, and their own life is like in turmoil, and they have no stability, and everything's erratic, and they're frustrated, and nothing's working right. And it's like, do you see that part of the common denominator is you? Like, right?
Yeah,
like,
baby.
You got to meet somebody who is this awesome, grounded, really functional human being who's got their shit together, and their life is pretty awesome. Why would they want to be with you? Right?
Yeah.
Like, but if you are in a really good place, then you're going to attract somebody of that same caliber, right? Because we always want to be with somebody who is at about our level, or maybe a little bit better, to inspire us.
Yeah. I mean, and it's so funny you would say that, because I have a family member who is always the victim in his stories. Always. The job has, he's been fired from the job because, they didn't like him. He's evicted from this apartment because of this thing. He's broken up with this person because they did this to him. It's always someone from the outside hitting him. It's never his stuff to own. There's always an excuse. And granted, the stories sound really good. It makes for really good drama and really good TV. He can have like a whole Real Housewives show if he wanted to, with the drama that comes up out of that stuff. But baby, it ain't everybody else. It's you.
Right. And I don't want to live on the Real Housewives of Atlanta. Thank you very much. Like, I don't want my life to look like a reality show.
Absolutely.
And I don't think people actually realize that, if you are the victim in all of your stories, if something's always happening to you, baby, it's you. And that is a hard pill to swallow, but go and swallow that pill. Here, plenty of water. Have a drink with me right now. Go and swallow that pill. I promise you'll feel better in the morning.
Right. And I mean, like, it's easy for us to be glib about this, or say, okay, just, swallow the pill, do it, get over it. But let's admit, like, this is a effing hard thing to do. Like, to admit to yourself, like, I am the creator of all my own problems in life. I am the reason my life is the way it is a really difficult thing for people to own, because in some ways it's a lot easier to maintain victim mentality. It's a lot easier to say, these things happen to me. And I remember the very first time I ever encountered the idea of karma, that anything that happens to you is a direct result of previous actions you have taken in this lifetime or previous lifetime that you may or may not remember. It made me feel empowered in a way, because then it was like, oh, well, then this is my own doing. This isn't just happenstance. This isn't just woe is me. Then I can claim responsibility, and I can choose differently, and I can act differently, and start to shift things around. So in the future, I can live in my power, and I can live in my strength, and I can live in integrity.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of people, you have to really sit and think because, like you said, that's a really hard pill to swallow. I mean, you're gonna need more water than I just presented to you, right? But it's a really hard pill to swallow. But you really have to think: what have you allowed, and what have you actively participated in? Because there's not a part of your life that you haven't actively participated in, and you have to ask yourself: if you're always the victim in your stories, and these things are always happening, what's the payoff that you're getting in all of these? What because you're not doing anything in your life that you're not getting a payoff from. Let's be real about it. There's nothing that you're doing at any point in your life that there's not some sort of payoff for. So what is the payoff for being the victim all the time?
I think there is, though. I think there is this feeling of like righteousness that comes with victimhood. Like, I'm somebody who, when I was younger, felt very victimized all the time and very much would spin scenarios to make it sound like I was faultless and other people were to blame for my situation. And there was almost this feeling of like righteous indignation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I don't want to use the word fun, but in some ways it's a little intoxicating in a similar but not quite the
Yeah.
same way. It's like when you know you're doing something wrong and you know you should not be doing it, but there's still something kind of fun about doing something wrong. And then later you're like, I don't feel so good. That probably wasn't the best choice. Like, I feel like there's a little bit of a parallel with that.
You are absolutely right. It's absolutely intoxicating. It's there is a bit of self-righteousness there, and it's also a bit of pride. I think it's really a whole lot of pride that just like, I'm wrong. I'm not wrong. They've always been wrong. It's always them. No, baby, I promise you it's not. I promise you. But it's so easy. It's so easy to point outward. But it's like what my grandmother always says: anytime that you're pointing a finger outward, just remember that you have, three pointing back at you and a thumb on the way. So all them fingers pointing back, you only got one point outward.
I love that. Oh, that's a great metaphor. And something I've been reflecting on too lately too is, frankly, I think that there is something fun for people to feel like there's somebody more powerful out there affecting them, like to put oneself in a state of subjugation. And certainly we see that like in BDSM and sexual roles where people will want
Yeah,
to
yeah,
feel
yeah.
they're the one being hurt. But I've been thinking about that a lot in contemporary society with the rise of conspiracy theories, in particular, because it's this idea of there's somebody else out there who's all powerful, who's negatively affecting me, and they're the one with the power, and I'm helpless, and I'm being directly affected by them. Like, I think people in a very similar way like that feeling of there being a great conspiracy, that there are these all-knowing, all-powerful individuals who are taking advantage of them, because that comes with a sense of, it could be righteous indignation, but it's also that sense of, hey, I might feel powerless in my own life. I might feel ineffective, but somewhere out there, there is somebody who is powerful. There is somebody who can affect change. And even if it's in a negative way towards me, it creates this almost like parental figure like we had when we were kids, if there being this
Mhm.
person who is in control, and the safety that provides us, even if ironically, it's to our own detriment.
Yeah, and we do. I mean, we have the habit, and I mean, I think you'll raise your hand because I'll raise my hand as well. But we have the habit of curating these cute little worlds that everyone is just like us, or they're very similar to us. They say the same things that we do. They believe the same type of things that we believe. They behave in similar type of ways, and then anything that comes against that nice little curated bubble, oh my God, no, you're wrong. Oh no, that's not the way it can be. Oh no 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 no. And we're not willing to let anyone or anything in that curated world, no matter if you're sitting in a world full of conspiracy theory. I mean, there are people that wade in that thing like they are swimming in the Olympics, and that's good for them. That feels good to them because they're getting that dopamine hit first of all, and then they're getting that immediate reward. It's kind of like when you go to Vegas and you hit the slot machine. I mean, let's be real. You're going to win something, and they're going to give you a sizable enough amount just to make you feel like, oh, I can't leave because what if the next big one's here? It's the same thing we do in our lives. What if it's the next big one? What if I pull the slot machine handle and it's the next big one? See, and then everyone else is wrong. No, you're still, even in that curator world, you're at the core of it.
Yeah. Amen.
What happens if you let someone else in or something else in to that little curated world?
Yeah, and we as a society are losing the willingness to wrangle with our version of reality and wrangle with our truth, and watching how the world is becoming not only partisan but hateful against somebody who would challenge our viewpoint,
Oh my
hateful against
gosh.
somebody who would say, no, there is another vantage, will you consider it? And then we demonize them for it.
Yeah, I mean, and one of my favorite professors in college, I don't even know if he's teaching anymore, but his syllabus when we came to, it was my sociology 101 class. Here I am, just a little freshman. I promise you, I'm going somewhere with this. Here I am, just a little freshman, and he hands us this syllabus. I mean, it's as thick as this. I mean, and I'm like, this is the syllabus. I mean, and it's stapled with articles and everything, and I'm like, this is not a normal syllabus. And he actually, part of our first exam a week into the class was over the syllabus, and he had this acronym in the syllabus, and it stood for people who want to do our thinking for us. And we are so content with letting those people in our lives, whether that be your mother, whether that be your lover, whether that be, even your children. I said it, even your children doing your thinking for you, that you completely just disregard all critical thinking skills, and you're just like, it's easier to let them do it for me. And when he would see that happening in the class, he had a stamp that he would put on stuff, and he would put it. It's the stamp said crap, CRAP. And of course, everyone, if a freshman, you're like, oh my God, I just got out of high school. You can't tell me that this is crap. Well, crap stood for completely ridiculous and pathetic. And he would let you know if you came up with something that was completely ridiculous and pathetic, you gotta stand it and own it. And a lot of times we're not willing to stamp things in our lives as crap. A lot of the thoughts that we have, a lot of the people that we have in us, a lot of the way that we let people treat us, and a lot of the situations that we put ourselves in, let's be real, they're crap. But we take it because it's easier to let those situations and those people and those things do our thinking for us than to actually stand up, because then what happens? What happens when you stand up and you have a different voice? They're not going to love me anymore. They're going to leave me. Sometimes you got to be willing to stand out on the ledge by yourself. You got to be willing to lose everything to gain you.
Right. And it's interesting, as queer individuals, you think that we would be strongly rooted into that, because at some point most of us have to do that in our life with the coming out process. But in fact, it's almost a little bit like that we grew up in that fear of rejection. We grew up in that fear of ostracization, or something close to that. Is that it's almost like made us reticent to want to dare to be left out again, right? Like that as we mature, we maybe have come out, we start wanting to subscribe to the standards that gay culture has provided, right? That we need to look a certain way and act a certain way and drink a certain way, behave a certain way, because we're so afraid of really allowing ourselves to stand out and risk being excommunicated again. That we have a tremendous fear around that.
Yeah, and I think it's such a big thing that we're trying to figure out who we are. That's one of the big lessons in life, trying to figure out who you are. And if, we as queer people, we come out of the closet and it's like, it's supposed to be all, rainbows and Skittles and all that wonderful stuff, right? Well, you realize, at least from when I came out to my parents, I came out to mom, of course I built this whole big thing up in my head, and this just kind of goes to show you how it works. But I built this whole big scenario up in my head, and mom literally looked at me. She said, okay, well, do you feel better? And I'm like, what? She was like, honey, I've known that since you were 2 years old. I've just been waiting for you to tell me. And I'm like, okay, first of all, ma'am, you stole my moment. First of all. Let's be real about that. And so I was like, well, do I tell? She was like, well, it's your story, tell your dad. So I went and told dad, and he's watching football on TV, and I went and tell dad. I had that whole feeling of, oh my god, he's not gonna love me, he's gonna lose it. And I said, Dad, I'm gay. And he was like, with the remote TV, okay, will you move? Again, another person that stole my moment. Right? And so, I mean, I'm saying all of that to say that this whole big thing of being excommunicated or not wanting to miss out or, subscribing to a party line and thinking that you should behave in a certain way or be a certain way because you're a part of a particular community is crap. It's literal crap. I mean, here I am, a queer gay man in the Midwest that has left the church, and I all those, none of that stuff matches up. If you had a bingo card, that would not be a bingo, right? Like queer gay, Midwest, okay. But none of that matches. But guess what? No one has left. It's all often what we do is we build up these situations and these things in our mind, and they are debilitating because we're really good story writers in our mind. Like Stephen King has nothing on what you can do in your mind. And that fear of being excommunicated, if you just stand up and figure out who it is that you are, not who it is that people say you should be or this community says that you should be or says that you should want, you'll be better for yourself for it. But again, that's a level of discomfort you have to be willing to sit in with yourself and say, I don't know who I am, I don't know the things I like. Then you can start building and you can start exploring.
Yeah. And what a beautiful journey it is once you start facing it and start to engage with trying to figure those things out. And realizing too that 99% of the time the thing that we're fearing, the fear itself is so much worse than the actual experience.
Oh my
right?
gosh.
You had all that dread about coming into your parents and it was such a non-event. And how often is that the case in our own lives, right? We're like, well, if I really owned who I was, if I really explored everything about me, I would get rejected by my family and friends, or I would lose so many of these things that have defined my life thus far. And that fear is usually so much greater than what you ever actually experience.
Absolutely. I mean, and even if, I'll speak for me, even if mom and dad had a completely different reaction and, said, you need to go, you need to get out, guess what? Even that is a learning experience. Now, is it going to suck at the time? It's going to suck. It is going to break your heart. It is going to probably put you in the floor for quite some time. And you're probably going to log some time and some hours on the therapy couch and with some coaches. That is completely fine. But it is a learning and a growth opportunity for you. And it doesn't feel good. But guess what? All growth is not going to feel good.
Yeah.
All that stuff's not going to feel the greatest for you. But I promise you, if you allow yourself to go through it, if you allow your heart to shatter and to break for it and really just come out of it and not be indignant about it or not be defeated by it, you'll grow from it and you'll have a completely different view of your life, your experience, and your world.
And I think what you highlighted is such a beautiful truth, and it's something I've been reflecting on a lot lately, is that discomfort instigates growth. That if everything were comfortable and easy, there wouldn't be a big impetus to try and evolve and change. But when something's not easy, when it pushes your buttons, when it's uncomfortable, when it brings up difficult things for you, it suddenly pushes you to strive and to grow and encompass these things and to become more deft at handling them. And, a lot of my biggest life lessons have come through very traumatic experiences or very disappointing experiences or very painful experiences.
I mean, your very first life lesson was a big experience, and it's one that we all share. Coming out of your mother's body. That was the biggest trauma. Do you know the amount of pain that she had to endure to get you here? Do you know the amount of trauma and pain that your body had to endure to get here? Whether they just...
Unless you're my mother, because apparently, according to her, it was a fabulous experience and she loved every moment of it. So,
my mom, on the other hand, will tell you the exact opposite. She told them to get me out of her, and they were like, well, do you want a February 18th baby? You want a February 19th baby? They were like, get it now. So even that, you know what I mean? That even if your mom had that fabulous experience and it was all, rainbows and sunshine, for you it wasn't, because the only world that you known had been inside her. And then now you have someone, you're being pushed out and, oh my gosh, what is all this? And now you're having to learn how to breathe and to react to stimulus and things you didn't know. But guess what? Here you are.
It's true.
Yeah. It's true. So you really have to push through the trauma. And that's not to say to ignore your trauma. I'm not saying that the things that happen to us aren't real, that they aren't valid, and that you don't have a right to feel the things that you feel about them. There are people in your life, there might be family members that you don't speak to anymore for very good reasons. It's not to say that stuff is invalid, but make sure you grow from it. Make sure you learn from something from it. The question I always ask myself is when I look back is like, what is the lesson? Because if I don't get the lesson, it will continue to appear in my life over and over and over again. It'll just come in a different package and with a different name, but the core lesson will be the exact same until I get it.
Amen. Yeah, and I often say, when those big lessons come up, first life's going to just nudge you a little bit. And then if you're not taking the lesson, if you're not working on it, then it starts to poke you, and then eventually it slaps you, and then eventually drops an anvil on your head if you're still not listening.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what happened with my sister. With her, she, and I love her, but she was doing some things she shouldn't have been doing with illegal substances and, messing with the wrong people. And you had the police just stop you and say, hey, we know what you're doing. And couldn't tell her a word. Then there was a house raid. They still didn't do anything. Couldn't tell her a word. She continued. She's in jail. And they gave her a 30-year sentence. Am I sad that she's not with us and that she has a 30-year sentence? I'm sad for that. But talking to her, she said, this is exactly where I should be. This is where I need to be because I wasn't hearing anything else. She said, now I'm sober, I'm clear-minded, and I realized I got myself here. None of y'all did this to me. Y'all tried to tell me, but I got myself here. And she said, I don't even know at this point that if I were to get out tomorrow, that I wouldn't go back to doing that same stuff. That is powerful. And that's that anvil that you're talking about. That's that she got crushed by that anvil, and she's like, you know what? I'm going to sit here on the ground for a little bit and I got to figure out what's going on next. Yeah. And it's okay. It's okay to camp out. It's not okay to camp out in that valley of shadow of death. Pass through it, but recognize that shadows are there and look at what's casting the shadows.
Yeah. As I've always said, it's like, I'm not going to push you to learn your life lesson because life is going to insist you learn it at some point. And if you don't want to learn it now, you don't have to, but you will learn it at some point.
Absolutely.
And for me, I'd rather learn it sooner and when it's still a little bit easier to digest rather than having to wait till the slap or the anvil comes, because they can be needed, but they're often a lot harder.
They're really bitter pills to swallow. I mean, my slap was, like I said, about a month ago when he sat me down on the couch downstairs and said, you either do something about what's going on with this person you've become, or I'm leaving. Wow. Okay, so and again, the first thing was just start trying to throw it back at him, but guess what? It would have been a cop-out. And I had, and you really got to sit in that. You can't point outward, and you really want to. No one wants to be told, that pretty much right now you suck as a person. But no one wants to have, be told that. But guess what? If it's the truth, it's the truth, and you got to own it.
Yeah. Question I have for you, as our resident relationship expert, gay relationships, same or different from opposite sex relationships, and because with marriage equality passing a few years ago and the many-year push that came towards that, one of the principal arguments made was the only difference between heterosexual couples and homosexual couples is what they do in the bedroom. But then you have some more radical perspectives that say the only thing that gay couples and straight couples have in common is what they do in the bedroom. And then apart from that, they're entirely different. So from your perspective, what would you say in response to that?
I think it's the wrong question that people are asking, because all relationships share three things in common. And whether it's how you're relating to food, whether it's how you're relating to your parents, whether it's how you're relating to addiction, sex, your romantic partner, the three core questions are, do you see me? Do you hear me? Am I important? Any of those things go unmet, then you have a breakdown in the relationship. So are gay relationships the same as straight relationships? Fundamentally, at their core, yes. Are there nuances that are completely different? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But again, I think for a lot of gay couples, they've had to shed that life of, hiding and being what everyone else expects for them to be. So they're completely upfront, or we're completely upfront about what we will and won't tolerate, the things that we do and we don't want, and the ways that we can express ourselves.
Love that. Do you see me? Do you hear me? Am I important?
Yeah.
One of the things that, all queer couples have to deal with is this shared history of trauma,
Oh, yeah.
growing up queer. And that for many of us, there's a strong desire to seek validation externally. And one of the more common or consistent ways that people try to do that is through sexual validation.
Yeah.
And we certainly see in the LGBTQ community that there is a very high rate of like open relationships or adultery, right? Like that. It's very unheard of to find a gay couple that's monogamous where at least one of the partners haven't cheated. Do you think in this idea of the difference of like straight and gay relationships, like, do you think that there's something different in there because we all come from this experience of one, feeling invisible, feeling dangerous as we are, but wanting to feel seen, wanting to feel valued, and that sex and sex appeal is a huge part of that for a lot of gay men?
I think for gay people, we've spent our lives in that metaphorical closet, and we feel like that once we come out of that we've missed a whole world. However long you were in the closet, whether you were in there, whether you came out at 8 or whether you came out at 18 or 30, you feel like you've missed a part of the world and a part of your formative years and your formative experience being in there. So at that point, it's just like, oh, I'm reliving something that I never got to live in to begin with. So I think that's why in gay relationships you see this openness, because it becomes an imbalance. And this is what I have seen. This is what I've coached people through. That it becomes an imbalance. That okay, now that I'm out of the closet, I want it all. I want everything, and that you going from one extreme, taking the pendulum from here and swinging it all the way over here, that's still imbalanced. You have to find the balance of what is. So instead of getting in a relationship after you've come out of the closet and you've grown comfortable with yourself and being a queer person in the world, maybe it's time for you to again sit down, figure out who you are, what are the things that you want, before you ever begin talking about bringing someone else into your life to share your life with. Because if you're going to do what you're going to do, I've always said, even to my hubby, I've always said to him, said, if you're ever in a position where you're feeling like that you need to cheat on me or you need to go outside of the relationship, first of all, do it, but give me enough respect and trust to tell me and leave me the hell alone. I promise you, yes, it will suck if you say I found someone else, I'm going to be doing my thing. Or I just want to go do my thing. It's going to suck. It's going to break my heart. Absolutely. But I promise you I'll be okay. And that's what I say to all queer people. A lot of times we're not ready to be in relationships. We don't know how to be in relationships because what we've had modeled is not something that we've even been able to identify with. So you got to figure out what a relationship looks like in your life. Is the first formative relationships we have are with our parents or with whoever raised us. How's that relationship? Is that relationship healthy? Are you guys able to communicate? Are you guys able to talk about some stuff? If that's not healthy, then you're going to reflect that in any relationship that you bring. And that's going to be in your friendships. That's going to be in your relationships with money. That's going to be in your relationships with sex, food. That's going to completely be a reflection in everything that you do in your life.
Hence the need to do all the self-work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we run away from doing that self-work until something debilitating happens with us. In the gay community, that's typically some sort of diagnosis that, oh my gosh, that woke me up, where there's your anvil to wake you up. Some people don't even take that anvil. You know what I mean? So it's really having that tough conversation with yourself, because having a open relationship or wanting to have sex with everything that moves, that is a reflection of something that's going on internally. So the question is not why are you having all this sex? The question is, what are you avoiding? What are you not confronting?
Now, from your point of view as a fellow life coach, what is the borderline between somebody would want to work with somebody like us versus when it's like, I think you need to go through work with a therapist? And not to say you shouldn't do those things concurrently, because I definitely think, a lot of people I work with do also see therapists, but where's the dividing line for you between, hey, this is stuff I can work on my own or with a coach, versus I think there's some really deep psychological stuff that I really need a medical professional to help me with?
I mean, if you are manic, if you're like, oh, my dad is bipolar, I think I have the same characteristics. If you start noticing those type of things, then probably a coach is not going to be the best starting point for you. They can assist with and build on top of what's going on in therapy or with a medical professional. But make no mistake, we're not, medical professionals for the most part. There are some medical professionals that are life coaches, but at least in my experience, and I'm in your experience, neither one of us are, medical professionals. Neither one of us hold a degree. So if you're feeling like there's some sort of diagnosis there, or you're manic, or you're feeling, unstable, or you're feeling like you're going to hurt yourself or someone else, that is not the place to start with a coach. That's the place to go to a medical professional first and get some real help, because there could be something chemically imbalanced there. There could be all kinds of things going on there.
Yeah. And just to reaffirm the idea that it is never wrong to ask for help. It is never wrong to say, hey, I need more help than I can give myself right now. And that looking for a therapist, looking for a psychopharmacologist, looking for someone to help you attain stability and wellness is an act of bravery and an act of self-care, and that no one should ever shy away from those things if it's something you're wondering about.
Absolutely. And even if you come to a coach first, even if you look up and you see Kay, or you see me, and you're like, okay, I'm going to start with them. I think we have enough connection and know enough of what we're doing that we're going to say, okay, I'm glad you're here, but these are the things that we need to go ahead and have done first. I need you to go ahead and get a therapist, and we will help you. If we have to, do a little bit of legwork and go online and look up some therapists in your area, hey, we'll help you do that. But it's not a problem to even start with the coach, as long as you're open to, like you said, I need help, and sitting in that. Because I wouldn't trust a life coach that don't have a coach. I wouldn't trust a therapist that doesn't have a therapist. I have both. I have my friend Amber, who was a life coach, who I thought I was a pretty good life coach until I talked to her, and she cuts through all of the stuff, and it's just like bam. And that's my approach, but she sees stuff in me that I don't see in myself. You know what I mean? And then going to therapy, it's also a really good just addition. Think of it as, instead of saying, oh, I need help, think of it this way. Think of it as a spa for your mind. It's just a day at the spa for yourself.
There you go. I love that. Beautiful story. Yeah. I think we're in a pretty good pausing point for today's conversation, but there will be more to this conversation moving forward. So look forward to spending more time with Larry and I in an upcoming video. Larry, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. I loved having these conversations.
Likewise. All right, so thank you for joining us at Ecstatic Self. Please check out my upcoming book, Journey to the Ecstatic Self. I'm available now online and then Amazon and wherever books are sold. Larry's book is Where's My Pizza?
It is Where's My Pizza? How to use the power of expectation to create the life that you want. Also available online and wherever books are sold.
It's true. It's a lovely book. I have read it. It's a lovely way to work on being more intentional about how you set expectations in your life to better manifest the reality that you want. So please check out both and join us next time. Thank you so much for your attention.
Bye, guys.